Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm your host, Sean Lavery. Flying solo tonight. Susie is out enjoying an evening with her husband, so I hope they have a great time, and we'll be happy to have Susie back next week. But for this week, I'm going to be the lone voice here tonight, except for our guest. So I know our guest has been on the Paddle and Fin show a few times. He's been on with Brian on the OG show, and he's also been on Rusty Hook a ton. But this is his first time on the Bass Fishing for Noobs show. So I just wanted to take a second and welcome Chris Payne to the show. So welcome, Chris. How are you, brother?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you, Sean?
I'm hanging in there. Busy, but I'm sure you are too. I mean, you're going to be working while we're doing this, so that's definitely
Yeah.
cool. For the folks who maybe didn't catch you on any of the other shows, why don't you just let them know who you are, where you're from?
Yeah. So I'm Chris Payne, the owner of Payne Outdoors, and been kayak fishing since 2003. So 20-year anniversary was in February.
That's
And
awesome.
I'm based out of Central Texas. So I'm north of Austin, south of Dallas.
That's a good spot. Good spot to be.
Oh,
What
yeah.
did what kayak did you start out with back in 2003?
I started with a 9-foot sit inside Pelican Ram X Endeavor. So it was a sit-in. It was the only one that the local academy sold, and it was. So I got married end of 2002, and my wife knew I loved fishing. I think we went fishing more than we went on dates when we were dating. And I told her I want a bass boat. I want a bass boat, and she's like, "Look, we've got a tax return coming. If you can find a bass boat for that." Well, our tax return was $400, and she said I could have half of it to spend on a bass boat. So I got into a kayak because it's what I could afford. I strapped it on top of my vehicle with some yellow nylon dock anchor rope, and didn't look back. So you can't really tell it on camera, but I'm 6'2". I was fishing out of a 9-foot sitting kayak, crammed in like sardines. But I loved it so much. And I fished out of that kayak for almost 7 years
Wow.
before I was finally able to upgrade and do some stuff. But
Did
it
that even
was
have rod holders or anything? Were you just kind of throwing it
no,
all in there? Yeah,
no,
that's what I
no,
was gonna
no.
say.
So yeah, I kept a small little bag that wasn't waterproof in front of me, and I had basically enough room on the sides that I could put rod holders down by or I could put rods down by my legs sticking out the back, and then I could paddle. And I had to kind of lean forward to paddle so that I didn't hit the rods or break a rod or anything like that. It was a weird looking thing, but there wasn't anybody else out in any kayaks. It's not like there were options really at that point. Everything
Right.
was almost wreck, especially in West Texas. Like there were no paddle shops in West Texas then, and so those were my options, and I'm really glad for it because I've actually to this day, even though I could buy one if I wanted to, have never owned a bass boat. So
Awesome.
it's been all kayaks for me. So.
And what are you fishing out of right now?
So I'm on the fishing team with Jackson. So I spend tournaments in the NAR with the new Mark IV drive, and then like for my Heroes on the Water outings. So I'm one of the officers for our Fort Hood chapter of Heroes on the Water. I fish out of the Coosa X now.
Okay.
So it's perfect for putting into those smaller areas and being able to chase guys down to get fish off hooks and help them rig up and stuff like that, and not have to worry about a pedal drive. And it's easy to load. So I car top
Mm-hmm.
all of my stuff. I even car top the NAR.
Wow. Okay.
And so if people want to check that out on TikTok, I'm Payne Outdoors pretty much everywhere. But I have a video of how I load that 145-pound NAR on top of my Subaru Forester. And it's not just sheer strength. Like I'm not a gym rat. It's actually leverage and physics on how you do it, and anybody can do it. Like
Okay.
anybody can do it.
Okay. Very cool, very cool. I didn't realize you were involved with Heroes on the Water either. I actually just
Yeah.
happened to be wearing my shirt. I'm involved with the Central PA chapter here, pretty heavily involved. Not quite an officer yet. They wanted me to be treasurer this year, and I was like, I just took over the kayak anglers. I'm on the board or the one of the directors for our local kayak anglers too. And I was
Yeah.
like, man, not quite yet. Let me get one season of tournament directing under my belt before I jump into anything else. But
There
yeah,
you
no,
go.
it's definitely a what I want to say, an organization that's near and dear to my heart. I got involved with them probably 3 or 4 years ago, and have pretty much dived in heavily to helping them to going to all the events, going to some shows, and sitting up at
Yeah.
booths and stuff. So definitely
Yeah.
cool to hear that, and definitely share that love with you. So
Yeah,
and
it's super rewarding. I love it. We've been going. So I was a founding member of the chapter here a little over 10 years ago.
okay.
So we've been going for quite a while, and we've got an amazing group of guys. And our current leader is a military vet. We're lucky to have military vets retire in this area, and so once they experience it, we kind of have a joke, right? Uh, the first time that you come to Heroes on the Water, you're a participant. The second time you come to Heroes on the Water, you're a volunteer.
That I can see where that comes into, because we have kind of followed a similar path with our volunteers as well. But
Yeah.
but it and I've done shows on Heroes on the Water before too, and but just to reiterate that, I mean, yeah, for folks who have never tried it, just to go and watch somebody, push off from shore, carrying
Mhm.
the weight of the world on their shoulders, and have them come back and see the difference in the person when they step out of that kayak is just, to me,
It's
that's what makes
amazing.
it all worth it. And
Yep.
um, so definitely an experience. If any of you guys are interested in trying it, just look online and find your local chapter, and just go out and just volunteer one time. You're
Yep.
going to be hooked. So,
That's all
well,
it
cool, man.
takes.
So, obviously, Chris is the owner of Payne Outdoors, and he does a great job making a ton of baits, and he's actually doing that in the process. So it's kind of cool to get to watch you at work.
Yeah.
Um, how did you get involved with getting, making your own baits, and getting your own gig going there?
Yeah. So well, I guess it was during the pandemic. I had some friends locally that were making baits, and one of them, so it's a husband and wife team, RPG Outdoors here in Central Texas, and they're also volunteers with our Heroes on the Water chapter, and we're all just good friends and fish together and all of that. And the so Angela, the wife, she started having some back issues and some different things, and she wasn't able to basically stand and do this for very long. And I said, hey, do you guys need help shooting baits? And it started, yeah, don't worry about it, it's not a problem. And I came out and just shot some baits just to kind of play around, and then I ended up helping them shoot baits for like a year. And they're like, look, you've really helped us out, but you could completely do that. Like, it's not going to hurt our feelings if you like, because you've already got your own brand. Because Payne Outdoors is 10 years old. We started in 2012. It'll be 11 uh, in August. And they're like, dude, you've already got a brand. You've already got a follow. Just sell your own baits. It's fine. And they're like, we really appreciate the help. And they've been amazing partners. They've taught me everything I know. They've been, we've gone in together on a lot of different things. And we have I mean, it's not an agreement, but we kind of talked about, hey, let's try to carry different stuff so we're not directly competing.
Right,
um,
which is
and
smart.
so yeah, and it's worked out great. And Robert and Angela are amazing. They make amazing plastics and do just really cool stuff. So if you know if you're looking for custom made soft plastics, like, we use basically the same stuff, and we have different styles, but it's definitely a way to go.
Well, we'll definitely include a link to them in the show notes so that folks can find both them and you, and see what you both have to offer. I did. I was checking out your Facebook page a little bit earlier, and just watching you like some of the videos on how to shoot baits and stuff. I thought it was really cool. Like I always wondered how you end up with a tail that's a different color, and I watched a video on that, and it totally makes sense. I was like, how the heck do you do that? How does it get joined there and look perfect? Yeah, look at that.
Like that guy right there.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of teaching people how to do that on like TikTok primarily. About once a week, I'll do a live that will go live for about an hour and a half, and we'll show people different techniques and then let them suggest different colors. They'll be like, hey, can you show me how to do this, or show me how to do this? This is one of the baits from that. It's chartreuse tipped on both ends. It's clear, has blue flake in the middle. Like it's really wonky. You're not going to find this in a store. Here, there we go.
Very cool.
So it looks way different than anything else, and that's really kind of what I focus on when I do those lives, is teaching people how to do that stuff, and then being able to do some cool custom colors. We get a lot of requests for like bubblegum pink.
Oh yeah.
People are like, hey, can you make a pink? Yes. We do. We have some crazy size stuff. I had a guy
Oh
say,
wow,
hey,
look at that.
Can you find me a big lizard? And I said, oh yeah, absolutely. So this is our new kind of Godzilla lizard. We
Oh my goodness.
on the website. So it is 8 inches from the bend here to the top of the head, but its tail goes down long. So this thing just is an absolute spiral.
Oh my goodness, I bet.
And so I've got a lot of bed fishermen that are looking for that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like so many people throw Magnum worms, and that just adds a little bit extra. It's something different that, once you've seen a million Magnum worms, that little bit of difference is going to be awesome. That's great.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And,
what else you got?
So I know we were going to talk about fishing and, talking about bed fishing. That kind of leads us into that. If you want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I one of the things that I happened to stumble on Jackson's page was a article that Chris had written about, and we'll link the article in the description as well, because it's a very cool article with tons of good maps, that will help you guys, learn to read maps and stuff and kind of know how to follow bass. The whole point of the article is basically tracking locating bass from pre-spawn time through the spawn and then post-spawn. So, basically, instead of just having to pick one time of year to kind of go out and try and, find these nice bass, you can actually kind of follow them along through as they progress through the season and know where to look. And so after reading that article, I reached out to Chris and asked him if he would come on and kind of, give us the overview of that, and dig in where we want to, but he was gracious enough to say yes. So that was kind of the impetus for me asking him to be on the show tonight. So that was what we were going to cover. So I know you basically called it your strategy for locating bass through the spawn. So I wanted to see, obviously we're, I don't know. I'm in Pennsylvania, so we're just getting warm enough to start. I think I was out on our local reservoir on Tuesday night, and the water temperature was 43. But now we've had probably 3 days this week in the 70s, so it's going to start warming up, I think, pretty rapidly. This weekend's supposed to be a little cooler, but then next week we're going to have all 5 days in the 70s. So I think the water temperature is going to be getting right to that good spot. So, but you in Texas, you're probably well past that, I would think, right? Or maybe not.
Yeah. We're in the spawn right now. It's actually cold and rainy. We had a cold front come through last night, so it's 52 degrees here right now.
Okay.
But it was 91 on Monday.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
Texas is just this time of year. You never know. It could snow, or you could have a tornado, or you could have sunburn. Like it's just all in there. But yeah, so I think you hit on a very important point. Is kind of when this strategy starts is at about 50-degree water temp. And I realize this is kind of bass fishing for noobs, so I will spin this that way, understanding that's the audience. So at 50 degrees, you have bass that are going to leave their winter haunts and start moving towards their spawning grounds, because sometimes, depending on what year, sometimes the water can go from 50 degrees to that magic 60 degrees, which is where bass will start to bed and start to spawn fairly rapidly. Like sometimes within a 2-week stretch, it can do that. It won't move quite that fast in deep, like highland reservoirs and stuff like that. But if you have a lake with a maximum depth of, say, 20 to 30 feet, it's going to warm up pretty quick. So what you're looking for is when you hit 50 degrees, you need to start thinking about these strategies. And we need to think about kind of that, basically the way to find the springtime speedway for the bass, right? How they're going to get from their winter haunts to their pre-spawn stage to the spawning stage. And there's an easy way to find that with maps. And that's what we lay out in that article on jacksonkayak.com. Is the easiest thing to do is to locate where you're pretty sure the bass are going to spawn. They're not going to be there, but locate either on the map or with a map and doing some water recon. Find out, okay, where are the bass going to spawn? Keep in mind that the northwest side of the lake is going to warm up the fastest this time of year because of the sun's position and everything. What you also need to look for in a spawning ground is typically you want something that is protected from the wind from 3 directions.
Now, I read that in there, and I was curious how that works. Is it like tree cover on the shore that blocks wind, or what blocks wind?
It could be bluffs. It could be, banks that rise up. It could be tree cover, like dense tree cover. You may have juniper bushes or cedar bushes, or you might have tall pines or whatever that cut the wind from high to keep it from sweeping down. There's a lot of different ways, but you can, if you have kayak fished on that body of water before, or even in a bass boat, really doesn't matter. Think about it as the place you would go if the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour.
Gotcha.
Right? Those coves that kind of have those shallow flats and that kind of stuff. You're going to want to look for those places, but sometimes shallow water can be dead water for spawning. And this is the key. You have to pay attention to what is under the water, because if it is mud, the bass will not spawn there. It doesn't matter. And if they have any other option, they will go somewhere else. They're looking for ideally small pea gravel because it's easy to brush away. It doesn't bloody up their tails that much. It's easy for them to defend. There's not as many creatures coming out of it. Because if they were to spawn on these big rocks, on tops of these big rocks, which you will see sometimes when smaller gravel is not available, but crawdads will get all in their nests and mess with it. Bluegill will have places to hide, and then they can ambush and then go hide again. And so they prefer the pea gravel. It gives good vision. It's easy to brush off. It's easy, a nice firm bottom. And usually places like that have a lot of sunlight, and you're going to get heat penetration, which is going to warm up those rocks, which are going to help those fry. So lots of things to look there. So if you're like, oh man, this is an awesome flat, but it's all mud, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time.
And figuring out the bottom composition. I know on when you're looking at your fish finder, that's going to be by the color, right? So a denser bottom shows up much different than a mud bottom, right? Or a rock bottom shows up.
So typically brighter means harder. So like when you're looking at fish, I don't know if anybody catfishes on here. I know this is bass fishing for noobs, but when you're looking for big flathead catfish, you can actually see their skulls radiate yellow. That's how you tell the difference between them and like a striper or something in the water, or a bass, is because they'll have this kind of diamond plate that'll show up on your graph, because it is hard as concrete, the tops of their heads.
Huh.
And so the bottom contour is going to do the same thing. It's going to shine bright yellow. And what I recommend for finding bottom composition, I know everybody's got like 3D side live super satellite sonar, but man, put it on the old 2D with the red, yellow, and blue, and look for the yellow bottom. That's hard pack bottom. If you've got any kind of, if it's kind of mushy and it's got, you know, different colors in it, or it doesn't show up well, or it's real fuzzy looking, like don't waste your time with that. If you don't have sonar, or you don't know how to read a sonar, tie on a Ned rig or a shaky head and cast it out across an area and drag it back slow. You'll be able to feel it.
Right.
Because if it's mud, it's just gonna suck down in it. And if it's gravel, it's gonna tick, 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 tick as you're coming through it. And chances are, if you've got cheap shaky heads or whatever, you may even chip some paint.
Yep.
So,
cool. So yeah, that makes sense. So now we know basically where
they're going to spawn,
where they're headed. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. So we marked that. And now we need to understand, okay, where is deep water related to that? Like, how close is it? Because typically in a place like that, there's going to be a deep water channel or a turn or something like that. Find the deepest water there. And if you're in a 2-foot flat and you're not in a super deep thing, it may be an 8-foot deep channel, right? And it may only be as wide as your kayak or something like that. But find that and work your way backwards to where the fish will stage up for the winter. So winter, you know, there's a lot of people that, I don't like to fish in the winter or whatever, but then you hear about these guys that go catch these huge bags in the winter, and you're like, what are they doing? Well, it's because the bass stack up like firewood. They know it's cold, so they're imitating firewood, and they are just stuck to the bottom, kind of like logs, and you'll just see them boom, 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 boom. It's like somebody laid out a bunch of logs on the bottom of your sonar. They're going to be in deep water. They're going to be near structures, so boulders, big trees. They're going to be on long points with a turn where the channel turns on the end of them. I had a guide teach me back in probably 97 or 98. He taught me a term that I still use every time I go fishing. And he just said, what you're looking for is not a spot. You're looking for a spot on a spot. You're looking for trees that are also on the end of a long point. And if you can find a spot on a spot on a spot, then you're going to find fish every time. Because if you find a channel swing with a long point that goes out to it with timber on the bottom of it or boulders, there's going to be fish there, guaranteed, every time. And so what you want to find are those deep water spot on a spot on a spot, and look at kind of what you're dealing with, right? Because they're not going to be up shallow, because they'll have to deal with the wind and the colder temps. They're looking for deeper water that'll hold temp better based on what's going on above the surface. And so then all you have to do, once you locate the winter spot and the spawning spot, is find the channel that connects those. Then what we do, so if it's 50 degrees, right, we're not close to 60. If it's 50 degrees, we start at the winter spot and we go down the highway, scanning for fish and fishing with like moving baits, right? So what you have to remember is these fish have been kind of lethargic for the winter. Big bass, especially if you're looking for big bass, will eat like once a day. They're going to eat every day, but they're going to eat once a day, and it's going to be something big so that they can eat once and then go back to just chilling. That's why all these guys throw these huge monster swim baits in the winter. You know, you're throwing an 8-inch Huddleston, or
mag drafts
mag drafts. Yeah. All of a sudden slow cranking this stuff, these big boot tails, or, things like that. So that's what they've done all winter. Now they're like, oh, you know what? it feels kind of nice, and maybe it's time to go find, you know, where we're gonna do spring break. And so they start to move, and then they start looking around them. And here's the beautiful thing: most of your bait fish, like, are going to be potted up. And so, you know, if you're a fat kid that walks into a free pizza buffet, you're going to eat more than one slice. So we got to think about that when the bass are starting to move and they see these pods of bait. They're going to be like, oh yeah, here we go. So they're going to be more active. So what you can get away with is you can fish moving baits. So this is the time of year I like to throw a crankbait. You know, a crankbait that's going to, if I can locate bait and figure out what depth they're at, I want to fish a crankbait that's going to go right through the middle of whatever that bait is. So if they're suspended at 12 foot, I need to fish a crankbait that goes between 10 and 12 feet. Like I need to be able to be at the level the bait is, because what the bait is telling you is there's probably a thermocline there, and there's probably more oxygen there than anywhere else in the water column. And so they're doing that. They're trying to stay warm and stay together and kind of protect and do all of these things. So find the bait on your graph. If you can't find the bait on your graph, or you don't have a graph, let's say you don't have a graph, I would tie on like a Strike King 5XD and throw the absolute snot out of that. Or if you're fishing deeper, like I fish a Highland reservoir, we've got water up to 130 feet, but I'm not fishing that deep ever. But I could have bass in 20 to 25 feet pretty frequently.
Okay.
That are at that depth. I'm tying on a 6XD.
Okay.
And I'm gonna crank, and I'm gonna burn that thing down. Here's a big mistake that I see a lot of people doing, and Keith Combs actually taught me this. I don't know how many of the listeners and viewers know who Keith Combs is. He fishes for Strike King. He's on you know, the Pro Tour and all that stuff. He was actually sitting in, I think, 6th place for this last weekend, going in the last day. But Keith is an awesome fisherman. He's a guy based out of Texas, and I've gotten to fish with him a couple of times. And he is known for crankbaits. Like, he throws a Strike King XD like it's his job, because it is his job. That is his favorite bait. He's won more money off of those baits than anything. And he said what people screw up with crankbaits is they've got a 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 reel so they can reel slow, but they take forever to get the bait down, and the bait never gets down to depth by the time, because most people can't throw their bait cast reels far enough to let the arc come through and actually get it to the depth. Or if it gets to the depth, it doesn't stay there long, and then it starts coming right back up.
Right.
And he said, what you got to do is you got to throw that thing as far as you can, or let line out if you need to and move away from it. And then you need to crank it as fast as you can until you start getting, until you're at that depth that you want to be at. And then you can slow down, because once you've gotten that bill through the water, right, and gotten it down to that depth, it'll maintain that depth with a standard crank. But if you're just kind of standard cranking it, it's going to take forever to get down there. So speed it down, make that bill almost hit, you know, vertical, and just torpedo all the way to the bottom until you get there, and then start your standard crank. And that will keep you in the strike zone for those bass way longer.
That's a very good tip. And I feel like, you know, a lot of people do struggle to get, like, when you say you're fishing a crankbait at 20, 25 feet, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking that's max depth for most crankbaits, you know.
Yeah.
That's really getting down there. You know, obviously the 6XDs are made to do that. Is there, like, does line choice play into that at all? Like what gets deeper, or?
Yeah, well, so it really depends on what I'm fishing, right? Because if I'm fishing in a lot of timber, I want to fish a stiffer line, so I've got a better chance of knocking it out with a pop. Because if I'm fishing mono, it's got so much stretch at 25 feet, I'm not going to get that out without a plug knocker.
Yep.
Right. So if I hang it in a tree with mono, it ain't coming out without a plug knocker. With fluoro or a fluoro hybrid, you know what? Let me give away a little secret here.
Okay. We always love juice here on the Noob Show. Whoop! Did I lose you? We're having a bit of technical difficulties, ladies and gents. Oh, there he's back.
So if you are a weekend angler, yep, there it is, and you're not fishing a bunch of tournaments, but you want to learn how to fish crankbaits, and you want the best of both worlds, and you don't have the ability or the desire to constantly switch out your line, look that up.
Yozuri hybrid.
Yes. So this is a 600-yard spool, Yozuri hybrid. It's $9.
Oh, wow.
And so if you are looking at filling, a Cardiff or let's say a Corrado 300B or a big Daiwa or something like that, if you're looking at filling that up and you want to do it on the cheap, but you also don't want crap line, the Yozuri hybrid has been amazing for me. And I'm not sponsored by Yozuri by any means. And there are other applications where I don't use it, but like for crankbaits, I think it's a perfect blend because you get some stretch like mono, but you also get some rigidity that you would get from fluoro. And so it's a perfect blend for me on the budget, right? So you get a good line, budget line, 600 yards for $9. You can't hardly beat that. And it works great for bait casters and crankbaits, things where you're going to have heavier baits. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for like spinning reels or like finesse applications because it's just it's just a little too rigid for that, really. And I think that Seagar and Sniper make Sunline Sniper are a little better suited for some of that finesse stuff.
Right. No, and that's basically what I use on most of my spinning rods for leaders. Well, because I use braid to leader for most of my spinning rods now at this point, and I pretty much run Sniper pretty much as my leader 90% of the time. I still have some VizX laying around that I'll use just because I have it, but
I feel like that's old school now, right? We used to all like jump on the yellow box CR and VizX, and then they came out with 3,000 other types of fluoro, and it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about this guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're fishing crankbaits and we're moving fast. Work your way back towards the spawning areas, and you're going to find fish, and those fish will be stacked up there today. They may not be stacked up there tomorrow. Right, they're going to continue to move down that highway, especially if the water temp has changed. Those fish are not going to be there. So this time of year, when I hear guys say, "Man, like we were on them in practice, and then a cold front came through and my fish disappeared," well, they just moved up or down the highway depending on what the water did. And so if you're fishing tournaments and you've got your spawning place and you've got the winter place, and you've made the connection of where that kind of springtime super speedway is, then you basically just have to fish from point A to point B, and your fish are going to be somewhere along there, right? And I think too many people get stuck on a spot, and they're like, "Man, I found this tree, and it was stacked with fish," and then they bang it hard during practice for 3 days, and then almost inevitably Thursday or Friday, a front's going to come through. And then they're like, "Man, they're not on that tree anymore." Well, if the tree's the only spot you got, you're going to struggle. Unless the weather holds, you're going to struggle.
And how often does that happen where the weather is the same from the beginning of practice through tournament day?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. It never happens. That's why you'll have these guys that jackpot like a one-day tournament, right? Because they can just show up and they haven't done any pre-fishing. Well, it's because they don't have bad information in their head. They're not memory fishing, right? They're spot fishing, and they're not tied to this idea of, "Man, I caught a 6-pounder in here yesterday. Where is it today?" Well, that 6-pounder is not going to eat again. And so anyway, so I think, and then once you find your spawning grounds, right? Once you find that, now it's time to slow down. All right, now it's time to start dragging your swim jigs or your big lizard baits or being able to flip a creature bait in there or something like that. Because if you're throwing a jerk bait through a bed field, you're not going to catch much. You might catch something by the tail, but you're not going to catch much because they're not going to leave for that. You have to agitate the fish when you're going into fishing that spawn. And so just think of it as once it hits 50, it's okay to fish fast. And then once it hits spawn, you got to slow down. So fish fast at 50 and slow down for the spawn. It's an alliteration. It's easy to remember, right? But before you're at 40, or like if I were going to come fish your waters in Pennsylvania this weekend and we weren't going to go fish a river for smallmouth and we were going to fish a lake or a reservoir, at 43 degrees, I would figure out every topo map I could and look at everything and find those winter spots. And I would just go spot check and just go scan for fish. And nope, they're not here, move. Go scan for fish. They're not here, move. Because there's not going to be that many places where fish are going to be held up in the winter. The wintertime, they're stacked. They're absolutely stacked because there is a lot more shallow water than there is deep water in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
So
for sure,
it's easier pickings. A lot of guys throw Alabama rig. It's not legal in some places to throw Alabama rigs anymore, but a lot of places, like in Texas, you can still throw it. So,
yep, PA weekend too. So,
yeah, that's another one. If you want to, find fish fast, imitate a bait school.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. And then post spawn, do they turn around and head back up the highway then, or at that point, what's your?
So post spawn, you have to think of it as like summer break, and everybody's going to kind of scatter and chase bait schools. So what happens is after the bass spawn, you start to get into the bluegill spawn, and so now you're looking for bluegill beds, and they're just predatory, going through and scooping up everything because they've had to babysit these stupid new kids for 2 or 3 weeks to get them on their own. And the males don't do as good of a job, but whatever, we've tolerated them. Now it's time to break company, and it's summer break, and they're going to look for, so if you've got threadfin shad, the threadfin shad are going to get going typically 2 to 3 weeks after the bass get going. And so when mama bass gets off the bed, she's going to look for big meals, and she's going to just go bulldoze those big old shad schools if you got shad. If you don't have shad and bluegill are the primary forage, go scan for bluegill beds. Like bluegill beds are the easiest to find with side scan. Because you can pick them up and it looks like moon craters, just boom, 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 everywhere. And you're like, oh God. And you better slow down and throw some crap through there. So if I'm fishing bluegill beds, I love a dark sleeper from Megabass. Like that is a absolute hammer. I know that there are a lot of people that throw that like Lake St. Clair and places like that during the bluegill spawn because they just absolutely crush that bait. It looks like a goby, but now that they have that the sleeper gill.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, I think I actually may have one of those. But the sleeper gill looks a little bit different.
Has a different profile, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll show you guys what that looks like right there. So that is a sleeper gill. So it's a different profile. It's taller, right? It's taller, mimics a bluegill really well. The thing that I love about these, this is like bass fishing for noobs. You guys may not even know about the Megabass sleeper, but the hook is actually right here in between these two fins. So there are two fins that peel down right there, and that's the hook. So they're hidden. So it's almost weedless. Like you can run through weeds and it'll typically go right through them. That makes it a great bait. It's got the weight of it is down here on the bottom of the chin, so you can drag that thing slow across the bottom. It also swims beautifully. That big paddle tail gives it a lot of great motion. It's good. Berkeley's got their dark sleeper imitation, which is that guy. It's got this monofilament. I bought some of them to try them out. I don't like them as well as the dark sleeper. They have a Berkeley power scent to it. It's fine. And if you like that, great on you. But, I got to give a shout out to one of the guys that fishes nationally. He's the one that turned me on to the dark sleeper a long time ago. Eric Siddiqui. He's
We've
like,
had
dude, you
Eric
should.
on before. Yep.
Yeah, he's like, you should try this thing out and down in Texas, because I don't see a lot of guys fishing it in Texas, but everybody in the north is fishing these things. And so I bought some off a tackle warehouse, and the first day I went out, I caught like 6 fish over 4 pounds on it. I'm like, oh my god, this thing is killing.
Yep.
So that's a great bait for bluegill. And then if you're fishing a shad spawn, man, jerk baits work fantastic that time. During that time, right, that post spawn, they work now and they work in the winter. Jerk baits are pretty versatile, but you'll notice if you watch like some of the pros fish on TV, you'll notice that sometimes they fish a jerk bait, just it feels like they're doing this all day long, right? It'll like give you tennis elbow pretty bad. And that's why a good rod for jerk baits is important, because it'll allow the rod to absorb that and not your elbow.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we're dropping all those secrets today. Sorry. But in the wintertime, you're going to fish it way slower, right? You're going to try to get it down to depth, fish is spinning, and you may let it sit for 10 seconds, 20 seconds before you move it again. It's almost like dead sticking.
Yeah. And I've actually had a lot of luck with that on the river this year. A buddy of mine, I was telling him, he's like, "Oh, I caught another 10 on the jerk bait." And I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm trying to jerk it, varying up my paw or my paws. I'm waiting forever. He's like, "Just crank it down to depth and let it ride in the current." He's like, "I don't jerk it. I just crank it down to depth and let it ride in the current." So if you have current, that works really well. And that was a little trick I picked up this winter, and I was like, wow, that works amazing. Look at that.
So, yeah, I do like a jerk bait. I do like a jerk bait. But there's a ton of different techniques that you can use. I would say probably 75% of the year I fish soft plastics, because I can make them in the body size and in the exact colors that I want, and I can match the hatch as to what's going on this year. Like, all of this stuff behind me are all custom colors that I make for different times of the year, different applications, different body styles. And so I fish a lot of soft plastics because I don't have to hope that Academy or Walmart or Bass Pro or Cabela's have the color that I'm looking for, because everybody knows as soon as somebody jumps on Facebook and says, man, we were smashing them on the snow ice color, whatever, 6 Sense Divine or whatever it is, then those pegs are cleared. There are people that will go in the store and they will clear that peg. They're going to have them all. Well, I don't have to worry about that. If I can find a picture of it online, I can match that color and build it in my shop. So, so that's the thing I love about bait making, is it makes it super easy to just kind of build my own, and it's really satisfying. 2 years ago, I won Angler of the Year on our local tour on baits that I made on a custom color that I designed, that nobody else was fishing and nobody else had, and I didn't tell anybody about it until after we were done. And they're like, what were you throwing? Because there would be days where I'd catch 30 fish and nobody else would limit.
Wow.
And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I've got a custom color that I worked up. And they're like, can we see it? Can we buy some? I was like, oh, no. After the trophy, then I'll sell you all that you want.
Then it's your bestseller.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, that's cool. And we've talked to a few different people who make their baits, and oddly enough, that's how a lot of them get started. Is they are tired of trying to find a color that they want that they can't, or like you said, they're always gone, and then they can never get the colors that they want. So they're like, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. And I've been toying with the idea of doing the same thing. So definitely interested in maybe getting into that a little bit. And I appreciate, I'm definitely we'll include a link to the TikTok channel as well, because that's awesome that to share that kind of info. Cause I know there's people out there, we've had guests or listeners approach us and ask us to do more on bait making, just because I feel like a lot of people, it's something that they want to get into. So.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, like, the setup that I use, like I've got some money invested in it that I've built up over time, But you could do a silicone mold with a small thing of plastisol and some color dye and stuff for less than $100. You could make a lot of bait.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a lot of bait. And so you don't have to go like full injection. Like, we've got dual injectors where we're running multiple colors and doing all this stuff through, 30 different types of molds or whatever. Like, you don't have to do all that. You don't have to be extra. It's just like, if you think of it like a vehicle, right? There are all kinds of different types of vehicles. You can get I just need to get to work, reliable, 1995 Ford Taurus or whatever. And then you've got, a brand new Aston Martin. Like, you could spend as much money as you want to in bait making. But what I would hope people would consider is start small and see if you like it first.
Right.
Because I actually tried to make my own baits in 2009. And so there were not a lot of resources out there for it. And there were not a lot of great molds. It was basically like do it was kind of the only game in town at that point in time. And I didn't have the money to buy some of the other molds. So I bought like a plastic poly Cinco mold.
Okay.
And didn't read up, didn't ask questions, didn't do any of that. And I knew I had to heat up the plastisol, and then I knew I needed to inject it some way into this mold because pouring it, like, it wasn't working because the hole was too small. And so I went and got a liquid antibiotic liquid dispenser and sucked it up in there, and then the plastisol just melted the whole thing in my hand, and 3rd-degree burns.
Oh no.
And I think I ended up making like probably 20 baits before I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I hate it. I don't know why anybody would do this. This is dumb. I'll just go buy Zoom and quit doing it. And it was actually the pandemic and looking for something to relieve stress because this is not my day job. This is like, I have like 5 different side hustles that I do after 5 o'clock, but I work in the largest hospital in the Central Texas area in a level 1 trauma center. And so the days can be very stressful, and I needed something to like chill out because COVID sucked for us. So when I was able to join Robert and Angela at RPG Outdoors to just kind of help them, man, it became such a stress reliever. And especially in the winter, because I started in the winter when it was really too cold to just be out on the lake all the time in the kayak and stuff. I could go in the shed and it was warm, and we'd shoot baits, and we had a TV up, and we just watch old reruns of Gilligan's Island and Perry Mason and shoot baits and just, cut up and be friends. And like, it was amazing. And so that became a stress relief outlet for me. And there's a lot of folks were like, why is your store shows sold out? Well, I actually shifted from that. So I left the body styles up, but I was selling to just the general public and anybody that came. And it became a job because I wouldn't know or have any contact with the people that would order, and they would order like 1 or 2 bags. And I never knew if they were happy with them or not. I never got any pictures back. And I was like, this is not great. And, there's monthly fees that go along with e-commerce and everything else like that, and a bunch of reporting. And I was like, let me simplify this. And so I started doing TikToks. And I'm like, listen, I'm just going to do TikToks. I'm going to shoot baits. And I've got some good customers that want custom stuff, and they just call me or text me, and they're like, hey, I need to get 20 bags of, my special secret sauce. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I got you. Right. And it makes it easier, but I always get pictures back. I always get feedback because I'm always trying to get better. Like if a color's a little bit too dark or a little bit too light, I use recipes. I do a lot of color matches for extinct stuff. So like this is one that I'm working on for a color in a Don Iovino worm. So Don Iovino is going out of business, and he has some really specific colors. And so I had a guy reach out that saw one of my TikTok lives. He's like, hey, can you match this color? And I was like, man, there are no good pictures of that on the internet anywhere. He's like, I will send you one. I've only got like 3 packs of these left, but I will mail you one. I said, that's all I need. I just need to see it in person, and I will see what I can do. And I made it up for him. And mailed him a small sample bag back, and he's like, holy crap. And I'm like, I got you. And since it's a recipe, I can replicate it,
That's
to
awesome. Yeah.
infinity.
Right.
And so doing everything off a recipe, that means I can tweak my recipe for all of these special requests,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can dial it in perfect, and then I can replicate it 1,000 out of 1,000 times. I get a lot of joy out of that. A lot more joy than just selling e-commerce. Like, we ain't trying to get rich to make baits. I just like seeing people smile when they catch something on a custom color that they thought up in their head.
Awesome. Awesome. That's cool. So, and I love that you're, somebody taught you and now you're teaching as well. So just passing it along, that's very cool too. So, again, Chris, thanks for taking time out from your side hustles and the craziness of everything. I truly
Yeah.
appreciate it, and definitely some good info. If folks want to follow along, or if they're looking to see what custom bait you can put together for them, what's the best way to find you and like your social media and stuff?
Yeah. So on Facebook, we're Payne Outdoors. On Instagram, we're Payne Outdoors. And on TikTok, we're Payne Outdoors. So that's Payne Outdoors. And man, that's our website is payneoutdoors.com.
Okay,
We're pretty consistent across
that
across the
makes it
board.
easy. Yep.
Yeah. So just check that out. And then my friends are at RPG Outdoors.
Okay. Yeah,
So
we'll
that's
definitely include a link to that. We'll include a link to the Jackson article as well.
perfect.
And also we'll show you guys where to find that Uzuri hybrid, and maybe dark sleeper and a couple of the other baits we talked about. But cool, man. That's awesome. Anything else you wanted to cover? Yeah, open floor. Anything you got in the works that yeah.
Um, I you know I appreciate the time, and I feel like I've talked about me quite a bit. So what I would say is, if you like kayak fishing, um, that probably the best thing that you can do is teach that to somebody else who needs that in their life.
Amen.
So find a local Heroes on the Water chapter. Like, go spend some time, just spend a day with those guys, and because for so many of our military vets and first responders, that gives them camaraderie that they may not have local access to. Like, luckily in Fort Hood, we have a huge retirement group here. A lot of people come here and then they retire here because the climate's nice. It's a little different than in an Alaskan station or somewhere like that. And not to brag on Fort Hood, but like, we got a bunch of lakes right here, like like a bunch of great lakes right here, and so I would say find a local chapter that's to you. There's saltwater chapters, there's freshwater chapters, there's chapters that specialize in rivers and lakes and small ponds. And we do a lot of private ranches because we don't like the public water scene just for safety. Go find your local Heroes on the Water chapter. Go spend a day just volunteering. They're not gonna try to arm wrestle you and make you be the treasurer or the president or anything like that first day out. But they do something amazing. I'm so blessed to be involved in that. I was not a service member. I have a brother who's a service member, uncles, grandfathers, and all of that stuff. And I've been lucky to work beside a bunch of just great people, military vets, and obviously first responders I work with every day. And just to see what happens after they push off about that fourth paddle stroke, they just look around like, what just happened? It's kind of like if you've ever put on noise canceling headphones and hit the button to do noise cancel and it just goes. That's the feeling when you are living with all of this, this stress and all of these like things in your head. Sorry, I'm getting choked up. All of these different things in your head and just 10 lifetimes worth of trauma and stress and worry and all of that stuff, and being able to melt that away even for 3 or 4 hours is just priceless. And what you're doing is you're teaching a new coping mechanism for when life does get tough, because what we do at Heroes on the Water is something that anybody can replicate with a cheap $200 kayak and a $50 paddle and a life jacket. Like anybody can do that, like $300 and you're on the water replicating what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would urge anybody, like, you don't have to spend a nickel with me. But please look into, just spending a day with Heroes on the Water and seeing what they do. And I think you will realize that is an amazing organization. They're 501c3, they're national, they're everywhere. I think there's like 65 chapters or something like that now. And I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of the kind of corporate, I guess, people who are paddlers and who are kayak anglers and who understand it. They're just such good people. You're not going to meet better people. It's hard for me to think that there are better people on earth than the people who are volunteering their time to do this for our vets, for our active duty service, and our first responders. Like, go check out heroesonthewater.org, and there's a chapter finder, and go do that.
Cool. Well, we will include the Heroes on the Water link as well. Folks, definitely go out. I can echo everything that Chris said. My experience has been exactly the same. I was intimidated at first because I also never served in the military. Now, I grew up on military bases because my dad worked as a contractor for the military, and I have plenty of family that was in the military. But I was like, well, are they going to really, want me? I mean, I never served, and I know there's some camaraderie there that goes specifically with that, but just the way they open up, knowing that they have someone who cares about them and wants to spend time with them and wants them to experience the joy that we have. It instantly melts away any barriers that are there. And so like Chris said, just give it a shot, go out, volunteer one time. You're not signing up for anything. It's just, I think once you experience it once, it's going to be something that you want to just keep experiencing, because it's a very moving thing to see people find an outlet that is healthy for them. So 100%. All right, man. Well, Chris, thanks so much again for coming on. I appreciate your time. Folks, definitely take a look at the show notes and, check out Chris and all the things that he has going on, the socials, the Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And this has been another episode for Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. You guys have a good night.